Welcome to this session on leadership. Successfully managing people often involves leadership. So what is a leader and what do we mean by leadership? Well, defining leadership is more difficult than you might think. As Bass pointed out in 1981, there are almost as many definitions of leadership as there are persons who have attempted to define the concept. To give you the flavour of the way that leadership has been defined, here are 3 examples. Here's the first one. Leadership is the process of influencing the activities of an individual or a group in efforts towards goal achievement in a given situation. That was Hersey and Blanchard in 1988. Here's another one. Leadership is a process of influence between a leader and those who are followers. That was from Hollander in 1978. Leadership is the influential increment over and above mechanical compliance with the routine directives of the organisation. That was Katz and Kahn in 1978. These definitions suggest that although there may not be a single definition of leadership that all agree to, the many definitions of leadership that exist tend to draw attention to at least 3 things. First of all, leaders are involved in relationships with other individuals or with groups of people. That is, there are leaders and there are followers. Secondly, leaders influence followers. And last, the influence of leaders on followers may extend beyond ensuring that the followers do the things that are ordinarily expected of them. That is, leaders may be responsible for developing new ideas and for implementing, developing, innovation and change. A great deal of research has been carried out on leadership. Until the 1960s, most of this research was concerned with just 2 objectives. First of all, researchers tried to describe the characteristics of leaders. Secondly, they tried to identify the characteristics and the behaviour of good leaders. And in doing so, they assumed that some leaders are better than others, whatever the situation they are faced with. So what did this research reveal about the characteristics which separate leaders from followers? A review by Stodgill in 1974 suggested that compared to followers, leaders tend to, first of all, be relatively intelligent, then have a greater need to dominate and have power. Next, be more self-confident than others. Also, have more energy and persistence, and have a greater knowledge of the tasks which need to be performed. The evidence that leaders have a set of characteristics that sets them apart from followers has been questioned by many, and we're not in a position to draw a conclusion which is firm about it. However, most researchers accept that it is not enough for leaders to have a particular set of characteristics. Instead, leaders must demonstrate these characteristics in the way they behave. For example, it's not enough for a leader to be intelligent, they must behave intelligently. Second, it's mistaken to think that successful leaders have the same set of characteristics, whatever the circumstances. Rather, the things that make someone a good leader depend on the situation. To take an example, the features that make someone a good leader in the middle of a battle between troops in a war zone are not necessarily the features that make someone a good leader in a school situated in a leafy suburb. Okay, so if there are no set features or characteristics that make leaders successful, whatever the situation, are there types of behaviour, ways of acting that differentiate between leaders? A major research investigation into this question in the United States identified two types of behaviour which differentiate between leaders. Okay, what are these types then? Well, the first is consideration. This is concerned with the extent to which a leader shows that they trust their followers, respect their ideas, and consider their feelings. Secondly, it's about structure. Structure refers to how much a leader organises and structures his or her role towards the attainment of goals. It also refers to the extent to which the leader organises and structures his or her followers or subordinates towards the attainment of goals. So leaders vary in the extent to which they influence and direct the activities of the people they are leading. In other words, the two principal ways in which leaders differ is in relation to which they are considerate towards their followers and the extent to which they structure and influence their followers by planning, communicating, coordinating events, praising, criticising, and similar sorts of activities. Given the evidence that leaders differ in the extent to which they provide structure for their followers, an interesting question to ask is, what style does the leader show in this structuring activity? Research suggests that it is possible to differentiate between democratic and autocratic styles here. Democratic leadership is said to be characterised by a tendency to empower others by setting high but not unrealistic goals, by making sure all followers and group members are fully involved in activities, and by facilitating the decision-making process without dictating the way that decisions are made or what the decisions are. Now, in contrast, autocratic leaders tend to disempower others and take control of the decision-making process. So, we know that leaders vary in the extent to which they offer consideration to followers and the extent to which they impose structures on those around them. And we also know that some leaders tend to be relatively autocratic in style, whereas others are more democratic. Now, there is one last major distinction between leadership styles that we need to know about, and this is the extent to which leaders are charismatic and tend to transform the world around them. Just as the distinction between autocratic and democratic leaders, researchers involved in looking at the charisma of leaders differentiate between two types of leadership style: transactional and transformational. So what are the characteristics of transactional and transformational leaders? Well, let's start with transactional leaders. Transactional leaders don't try to change the world around them. As long as their followers are meeting the expectations that they have been set, transactional leaders don't try to change the ways that their followers work. Also, transactional leaders are said to control the rewards that their followers receive. Followers are rewarded if, and only if, they perform or try hard enough. In contrast, transformational leaders are said to treat followers as individuals and evaluate them on their own merit. They also try to develop followers by offering them opportunities through mentoring and coaching. They encourage their followers to think for themselves. They offer a vision of the future, a vision which seems attainable and is both clear and positive. The transformational leader is generous in the way he or she presents achievements, sharing the glory with others. And this type of leader is also willing to go the extra mile and, where necessary, make personal sacrifices for the good of his or her followers or for the organisation as a whole. Now, it is important to point out that transactional and transformational leadership refer to different styles of leadership, not different types of people. So in principle, someone might act as a transactional leader in one environment and a transformational leader in another. What's more, it's not the case that at any one time someone is either being a transactional leader or a transformational leader. It is quite possible for a leader to be operating in transactional and transformational ways, or indeed not to be operating in either a transactional or a transformational manner. Another interesting thing about the distinction between transformational and transactional leaders is that it is tempting to assume that transformational leaders, or those people working in a transformational style, exist at the top of organisations, whereas lower level managers tend to be more transactional. In fact, there's evidence that both types of manager can be found at all levels of an organisation. However, evidence does suggest that leaders who are transformational tend to have more successful careers themselves, and also that their followers view them more positively than they do leaders who tend to adopt a more transactional style. So, if transformational and transactional leadership brings about success, what is it about these two leadership styles which makes them effective? Research on this issue was reviewed by an academic called Bryman in 1992. Bryman found that in the case of transactional leadership, the factors that seem to have the biggest impact on the effort and work performance of followers are charisma and motivating through inspiration. Transformational leaders who offer an image of an ideal, who present a figure that followers admire and look up to, and who inspire their workforce are the most effective. In the case of transformational leaders, it's the ones who ensure that the rewards given to followers reflect the effort they put in and the performance that they achieve that are the most successful. So, what are the practical implications of this for managers? One is that it is helpful for managers to reflect on their own style. Do you tend to be democratic or autocratic? Is it easier and more natural for you to adopt a transactional or a transformational style? Another is that managers should consider the situation they are faced with, the people they are working with, the constraints that they are working under, and then adopt a style of management which suits that situation. Thank you very much for listening to this session on leadership.